Hey Zoe,
Hey, Lo, how's it going today?
so good. I think this is our first ever episode recorded specifically for YouTube.
Yes, we have previous episodes, which you guys are welcome to check out on our YouTube channel at the Lo and Zoe Show. But this is the first time we're recording like real time, face to face via Zoom. So you guys can check that out now on YouTube. If you're listening to the podcast right now, we are now uploading these episodes to YouTube. If you want to see us chatting to each other, or if you consume content more so on YouTube, that's available for you now. And we're excited about this journey.
Yeah, we love the Lo and Zoe show. We really want to get it out to more people. And YouTube is where Lo and Zoe started, where we met unofficially, kind of. We've told this story before, but I came across Zoe on Bumble BFF when I just moved. We were both moving or living in Toronto, and you had on your profile that you were a YouTuber. And I also at the time had a channel that I was very active on. And so we connected there, and like 8 years later or something, the rest is history.
Yeah, so wild. Time flies. And I mean, I
know.
love this. It's kind of a full circle moment in ways, but we're just going to keep going.
I know. Yeah. So if you're listening to this on the podcast, you guys know the drill. And some of what we're going to share today are things that you've certainly heard us talk about before. But we just welcomed in a group of new people into our Quantum Creators course. And we, in that process, told a lot of our craziest quantum leap manifestation stories. And we thought it's been quite a while since we shared this on the podcast, now on our YouTube channel. And yeah, so that's what this episode is going to be about, because who doesn't love a good, manifestation story? And my favorite part about all of these stories is their very divine unfolding, the synchronicity involved with what Zoe and I call quantum creation. Do you want to actually give people a little bit of like a background to us in case they're just finding us here and what we're
Yeah.
about?
Yeah. So we're Lo and Zoe, and we're all about all things manifesting, of course, abundant mind, abundant life, just being very mindful about how our thoughts create things, how we are the creators of our reality. You've heard us say this time and time again if you're on the podcast. And we love to just reiterate that message to you that anything you desire is possible. You can, in fact, change the course of your life, of your future. If things in your life aren't feeling as ideal, as quantum, as magic, as love-filled, joy-filled as you want them to be, you have the power to create change. And so time and time again, we will, like Lo says, die on the hill of quantum creation. We will be here to inspire you about what's possible when you start to understand how reality is created at that subatomic level, which is what we teach inside the Quantum Creators course.
Yeah, and quantum creation, for those that don't know, we actually have a whole masterclass that is a very now consolidated space of learning about what quantum creation is. And when I say consolidated, I mean we have done countless 2, 3, 4 day live streams around quantum creation. And what we wanted to do was really create just a short masterclass for people that was very consumable, wasn't hours and hours long, to really make this method of manifestation available to as many people as possible. But quantum creation it's not just, I think a lot that word quantum gets thrown around a lot in the world of manifestation. And generally it's used to describe a big quantum leap of a manifestation. But the way we use it is that, and we're going to talk about our favorite quantum leaps, but before that, what it means for us, or more so than that, what it means for us is this method of manifestation that is built on an understanding of what the science is showing us about reality and the role that we and our consciousness plays in actually shaping the physical world. Because when we started, really getting big into manifestation, this was a number of years ago, Zoe was talking about it on her YouTube channel before it ever really, landed for me. We really had a hard time being consistent in our mindsets, in our manifestations, based on what most of the world teaches around law of attraction, and essentially just this call for almost perfectionism when it comes to our mindset, and this constant state of belief that you already have what you want. And Zoe and I made it our full-time jobs to figure out how to be, master manifestors. And we couldn't do it with that level of understanding or the rule book that people in the law of attraction world insist you play by, or many of them do anyways. And so I started really diving into the actual science behind things. I used it to really blow up my business very, very quickly. And we're going to share some of those stories today. I started sharing it with Zoe. Zoe just took to it really quickly. And inside of like less than a year, we launched the Quantum Creators course because we wanted to see if this approach to manifestation, which is very different, really takes an open mind, would resonate with people and help them create the change that it had allowed for us. And, for how many years has it been now? 3.5 years since we launched for the first time. The answer is yes. We've had hundreds of people through our course. We've watched them create wildly different realities in short periods of time. And it really becomes this way of being that is, there is confidence because you understand the science. It's not based on, rhetoric around just believe and just have faith and the universe has your back, because the science doesn't really, the science of like who we are as humans doesn't really support the idea that we should just be able to change our mindset just like that. But if you are understanding of reality and what manifestation even is on a subatomic level, if that changes, then so does your level of confidence and belief, your mindset, and therefore what you're able to create as a result.
Yes, it's through that education that you actively empower yourself in ways that you've never even thought or imagined possible yet. And this switch is flicked, and it happens for each of our creators that enter through the program. It happened for each of us. It's like all of a sudden you get this aha, this place of remembrance in your being of, oh my goodness, I know this to be true. I know that I have so much more power than I've ever given myself permission to believe. And once you start to access that through educating yourself, through diving more deeply, through being more aware naturally, you start to create predictable change through the quantum method, which we call it, or like in the quantum practice, which we teach inside the Quantum Creators course. But you start to just trust reality, trust your experience through life so much more, knowing that you, again, can create any change that you desire to see in your life. And it's such a beautiful experience to move through this space where you're educating, empowering yourself, starting to embody more confidence, but it's all-encompassing freedom that you offer yourself when you realize that you're free to be exactly who you are. You're free to feel emotions. There's nothing that needs to be controlled or perfected in order to create big quantum leaps or big change or big abundance in your life.
Yes, exactly. And we have over 100 episodes of the Lo and Zoe Show. We'll link our podcast down below for you guys if you are watching this on YouTube. And we talk about all kinds of things in terms of the journey of self-discovery, the journey of self-development, of healing your capacity to respond differently to the world, to hold yourself in a different regard. We really talk about the humanology of it all, which is what we kind of coined that term. But all of it is within context of quantum creation, and all of it is relevant in this process of creating your life consciously and doing so with the knowledge that we teach inside of our course, that we teach inside of our masterclass as well. And it allows for you, like Zoe said, to be a human, to have emotions, to not need to shut down, the ways that you feel because you are a human alive on planet Earth in the year 2023 or whenever you're watching this. You get to create your life anyways. And for me, that's always what quantum creation has allowed me to do, is it allows me to drop the perfectionism, to drop the conditions really. And that's for me what has allowed in quantum leaps, despite there being blocks, despite there being, things that I wasn't sure about, despite there being some uncertainty. It's like I could just let all of that go and make space for what I wanted. So from there, do we want to share some of our quantum leap success stories? And by the way, we have a couple of episodes too where we've actually interviewed quantum creators. So if you want some other, if you like this episode and you're like, just give me all the success stories, because we know how much it can help people's belief. We'll link those down below for for other people as well.
Definitely.
Yeah. So where do we want to start with this, Zoe? I mean, I know I can talk about what happened in my life in a short period of time after discovering quantum creation and starting to really integrate its teaching. So maybe we could do this like somewhat chronologically almost.
Yeah. Let's go
Because I mean, there were things that we were both creating before we had this awareness, especially Zoe. She had really had success on YouTube. You were living in Italy at the time, but I know you felt like it was inconsistent. You lived in your head a lot of the time. You demanded perfectionism of yourself in terms of your mindset. So there was just like, there was success in consciously creating your reality as there was for me, but it came with a lot of like, chronic just watching of the thoughts, so to speak.
Yeah, it was like this perfectionism, the self-judgment. And I would say like, I knew my own power, right? I knew the power of manifestation. I was kind of bitten in that sphere of like the law of attraction. I always believed in that. Even before I watched or heard about The Secret, I knew that if I really focused my energy, if I focused my thoughts, I could make things happen for myself. I actually have a video on my YouTube channel. I think it's like the law of attraction changed my life. And that talks about like the humble beginnings of like being in high school, like manifesting different things that I wanted and so on and so forth. But what happened was I remember, especially as I started to speak about it more, almost like teach on it a little bit more through YouTube, where I felt like I could create the results that I wanted, but I couldn't quite get them to be systemized or like predictable. Like there was always a bit of self-doubt of like, okay, I believe that I can do this, but if I'm not hyper monitoring every single like thought, if I'm not in complete control, I would decide that it means it wasn't going to happen. It was almost like, because the messaging was your thoughts create things, remain in a high vibe state. If you feel sad, if you feel melancholy one day, everything's going downhill. So that's where it perpetuated the perfectionism with me, because I understood how law of attraction works, but in the messaging that I'd heard, when it started to, when there started to be more content coming out with that, started to be more books, everywhere where I was looking, it was this message about like, think a better thought or feel better or else, right? Like it could be feel bad things or like, for quote unquote bad things, or like you're feeling an emotion that's a bit more challenging or undesirable. If you're feeling that, you will inevitably create that. And that's where I started to get into fearful thought spirals. It actually created anxiety for me. It created a lot of fear. And then understanding quantum creation really just gave me permission to like put down that way of being, put down the perfectionism, put down the like the being obsessed with my thoughts and suppressing emotion, essentially spiritually bypassing. I didn't even know I was doing that. Had to heal that later because, it's part of the journey, but I didn't even know that that's what I was doing. I thought that by suppressing emotions, I was actually creating quantum leaps when I actually was doing a disservice to my body, a disservice to my being.
Yeah. And we know that this is one of the number one reasons that people decide to join us inside the Quantum Creators course, is because they have been in the world of manifestation and content around this for quite some time. And it has put them into that place of perfectionism where the messaging is so heavily geared towards like, just be high vibe, just get happy, that if you're, which, if you're happy and you're having fun, for sure, that's a magnetic place to be. But it's the belief that if you're not that bad things are going to come to you, or you can't manifest what you need. So then you get like into this place where you're like, I need to pay this bill, in a week from now. And like, if I can't get really happy, it's not going to come. And that's just simply not the truth. And so you just start living in this state of like, we call it worryception, where you're worried about the fact that you're worried, or you're anxious about the fact that you're anxious. So, we have so many episodes on this, and we'll continue to talk about it on here. And if you're interested, then watch our free masterclass where we really dive into this more. But so chronologically speaking, so that's where like Zoe was at. That was more or less actually where I was at as well, even though I was newer to manifestation. I was about a year into growing my online business at the time. And it really was not going well for me, because I thought I need to be in this like perfect state of alignment, and I can't get there because I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know if this will be successful. How can I manifest if I need to know? But it's something that's so wildly outside of anything else that I've done before. How can I? Right. And so, I really started diving into the work of Dr. Joe Dispenza, who we love. And that really opened, he, in some of his books, combined with some other books that it sort of turned me on to, started really talking about the quantum nature of reality, and specifically the impact that our attention on something has on physical reality at a subatomic level, meaning that us actually observing or looking at something impacts how it behaves in terms of the atoms that make up our physical world. And so it just really, and I mean, we go into a lot more detail than that. Obviously, we actually show you guys the science and explain it in context to manifestation, but it just clicked something for me where suddenly I really started to be very intentional about my mindset work. And I no longer required happiness. I no longer required, like, all of a sudden I realized it wasn't really about those things. Right. And so I started visualizing myself. At the time, I really wanted to be full-time in my business. I wanted to go and visit Zoe in Italy actually, that was like, I wanted to do some traveling, and I wanted to be able to visit her. And I wanted that trip to represent me being full-time in my business. At the time, my living situation was really not ideal. I was doing my mindset work like in a park down the street from where I lived, because I would just do anything I could to get out of my home at the time. And it's a good thing that I didn't need to like feel successful in order to manifest that success, because there's no way that me, like I think I was like 30 at the time, like sleeping in a park was like me being like millionaire vibes, living in the end. But it was inside of 2 weeks of this understanding combined with the mindset practice that we teach in Quantum Creators, which is on average for me about 10 minutes a day, sometimes more if I feel like it. That within 2 weeks, I had an idea for an online course and I'd been launching online courses for about a year at that point and made little bits of money here and there, but I'd invested about 20 grand into coaches and like getting my business started and learning different strategies, and like very little return on investment for how much time and money I'd put into it. And I just downloaded all of a sudden this idea for a course that I could do a whole episode just on the unfolding of it and how easy it was. Like it just kind of happened for me almost, where all these crazy circumstances lined up. And I had not only this course, but an audience to launch it to inside of about 3 weeks. And so when I did launch it, I had about 20 people sign up for that first round, which was about $15,000 in revenue. And it was only a 4-week course. And this was after like I said, a year of like putting things out there and making really small amounts of money. And that was, I think, in September of 2018. And in January of 2019, I did fly to Italy and visit Zoe, and we did some traveling, and I traveled Europe for about 4 months that summer. And while I was in Italy and we were traveling, I started to share this with Zoe, where I was like I was explaining it, but it was still kind of integrating for me. But yeah, I mean, that was like where it started for me, where I was like, okay, this is very, very different.
Yeah, I love it. And I mean, I feel like what's beautiful about that, like that story or that specific example, is like you didn't give up on yourself. Like you believed in yourself the whole way through, even though things hadn't been as ideal or how you would like them to be for the whole year. It's like you invested in yourself. You stuck to it, right? You were resourceful. You were dedicated to you in this journey of entrepreneurship. And I think like that speaks volumes to who you are. And I just want to acknowledge that too, because obviously it wasn't easy going to the park to do your mindset work because your neighbor who was below you had a subwoofer and everything.
It's
like
a whole
that.
story. I mean, now looking back, I'm like, the universe was just like opening up a door and kicking me through it. But I don't believe, we were both so committed to figuring this out and creating really abundant lives and freedom-filled lives for ourselves, that it's not a coincidence that I picked up, the book that kind of set things in motion. It's not a coincidence that, later I told you so that we could share it with other people. It's not a coincidence that whoever is listening or watching to this right now has found this podcast episode or this video. It's like the universe responding. If you have a strong desire to truly create a life outside of what most people consider available or reasonable, you are being shown the way, right? And for me and for us and for many other people that we've helped now, this piece was something that they were shown, that we were shown for a reason. It was in response to a desire that we had, which was to become, master manifestors, quote unquote.
Yeah, it's like, it just speaks to how quantum creation has been the gateway. Like, as soon as you come to understand and integrate this content, whether it is like through the course and self-educating yourself, as soon as it clicks for you, it's a different life. Like we always say, there's life before quantum creators and there's life after, and there's very good reason for that. And it's because exactly like your story, Lo, it's like stumbling around in the sandbox, all of a sudden, like you know what you want and you're fully dedicated. You believe in your heart and your soul, what you're capable of. But then all of a sudden you get the quantum download, if you will, of what it actually means to be the creator of your reality, and understand that at the subatomic level, that boom, big shifts happen very quickly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So at that point, Zoe, you were getting ready actually to come back to Toronto. And that's when I think quantum creation really started to like integrate for you. So what happened then?
Yeah, well, I was super inspired about your story because I felt like what you would explain to me was what I was desiring in my move back to Toronto. I wanted to move back to Toronto because I wanted to become certified in life coaching and really build a foundation for my business. Prior to that, I had been doing an array of different things. I had multiple streams of income, like YouTube sponsors. I had some freelance marketing clients. I had written books and was making royalties. So I had created the multiple streams, but again, I desired this predictability in finances, stability in finances. And I wanted to become a life coach. And I always had this desire to create online digital courses, but I just didn't know the how. It felt like it was something so big for me. And then, we're traveling, we were in Tuscany at the time, and you're like, yeah, I made like this amount of money in like this amount of days. Like, this is how it happened. It was all quantum creation. And I remember it just like really expanded my realm of possibilities, because I was like, okay, there's something here. I'd kind of heard about the quantum side of things and educating myself in that way, and Dr. Joe Dispenza, but I honestly was resistant to it because of my relationship with math and science throughout high school. I was not strong in those subjects. And I just assumed like quantum physics, like quantum anything, like, it felt a bit mathy and sciencey, and that wasn't a strong place for me. So I'm like, maybe I'm better off just like trusting the universe and like going along this way. But then as soon as I landed back in Toronto was when I read Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself by Dr. Joe Dispenza. You and I started to dive into this much more deeply. I remember just like binging on Gaia, like just sharing all this content, sharing all these resources. And then it was integrated for me. And it's just continues to integrate more and more as you move through this process. But since then I was able to create, like, it was like instantly when I launched my life coaching business, I had a full practice of clients, and that just continued. The income just continued. The income just increased. And I do think that is and has been because of quantum creation. It was like I finally found the missing piece. And then, like I said, I was able to put down all of this excess self-judgment that was in my mind and this perfectionism, because I realized it's okay to just be me. It's okay to just be me, have off days, have ego days, if you will, be sad sometimes, and still like run my business as a total boss and make good money, like, and just live my best life.
Yeah. And at that time, we both wanted to move to Toronto. You were back a couple of months before me, and we both created really beautiful apartments that, like, to this day, I'm not even convinced were there before we decided to create. Yeah. We used to joke about that. Like, did these places even actually exist? And the unfolding of both of them was, very, I mean, I know for you found this place. I remember when you sent it to me, I was just like, that's where it was like this waterfront. And like, for anyone that doesn't live in Toronto, it is one of the most expensive countries in the world in terms of rent. People go to bidding wars on getting places. You have to give them like literally every piece of your history and financial world to even be considered. Like, it's pretty crazy what is required to get an apartment in Toronto, let alone as a single entrepreneur. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't know if you have like just a short story around that, Zoe, because I know that you had this visualization for some time from like a previous chapter in your life of where you wanted to live in Toronto, and you created that in moving back.
Yeah, like I always used to walk along the waterfront as like as a poor student, if you will. I mean, I don't want to use the word poor, but just to give you guys just the simplicity of it, where I'm like, one day, when I'm like CEO of a company, maybe I'll be able to have a waterfront condo. Like, I would love to have that. Like, lo and behold, I'm in my like mid-20s and I received this because like that's a quantum leap. And it was crazy. I was the first person to move into my condo unit and one of the first people to move into the building. Like, I literally felt like this apartment building was built for me. Like, this view, it was crazy. I walked into the condo to view it and I was like, this is mine. This is mine. Yes. I told the woman, she's like, okay, yeah, we'll just need this. You guys, I lived in Italy for like 3 years before that. I had no references. Like, I was an au pair for the first year. After that, it was like, and for any of you who have maybe like lived in Italy, it's very challenging to get an apartment. So it was kind of, I don't know if it was totally like legal or whatever. I'll just say, like, I don't know how the workings of that happened, but it occurred for me because that itself was another quantum leap. But basically I didn't have I did not have the requirements, let's say, like, quote unquote, that would have been ideal for someone to enter into this brand new like $1 million condo on the waterfront. Like, it was a quantum leap. And it was something that I spent time imagining, visualizing, but I never thought it would happen, of course, that soon in my life. But it did. Once this content started to download for me, it was like the leaps just kept coming. And like, same for you in your apartment, Lo. It's just, they were literally created for us.
Well, and one thing, like a couple months later, I started looking for places in generally the same area as Zoe. We actually lived quite close together. How much fun was that whole chapter?
So fun.
COVID kind of ruined it, but whatever, it's fine. We still had fun. And one thing about my like story of unfolding that I really love, and I use this as an example inside of our course all the time, or have several times in the past, is that the thing about quantum creation is there's something that happens that we refer to as the bridge of incidence or the divine unfolding, which is just every single thing that needs to happen between where you are and where you desire to be that allows for your quantum leap to manifest. And the universe gets so creative with this. And so I was also looking for a 1-bedroom in Toronto. It was going to be at least double from what I had paid in my previous place. I didn't know if I was going to be able to pay that. And what I could even find in that price point, which was around $2,200 a month in Toronto at the time, was like these small little 1-bedrooms that weren't even really what I wanted. And so I was going for like 2 months. I was driving an hour to Toronto to look at places. I was applying to places and like getting outbid by people, or like would choose somebody else or whatever. And I then decided to like really get serious about doing the quantum work around it, because I think I'd been too caught up in the doing as opposed to the imagining, as opposed to the feeling of it, as opposed to the application of what we know about quantum creation, which is like, get out of the how. And when I mean, you hear that all the time, but when you actually understand the science, you're like, oh, I really got to get out of the how. Like, I understand now why this is like literally none of my business. And so I went to that place and I just went like a couple of times. We talk about going to the quantum, like doing this mindset work a couple of times. And I knew what I wanted this place to feel like. And then it's a whole story, but a good friend of mine from high school, basically we had an event that we had booked in Toronto. And this was just a couple of days after I'd like really committed to just doing the energy work over the doing of like trying to make something happen and going to Toronto and not at all following the path of least resistance. And long story short, he was like, oh, well, if you're struggling to find a place, like I would love to have a place on the weekends where I could come and stay. And, if you could find a 2-bedroom, I'll like pay the difference. And so the story then goes is that we have a new budget now, and I email my realtor about it. He immediately brings up this list of places. And one of them, even though the pictures were terrible, describes a 400 square foot terrace with a Toronto view, which I was like, that's not a real thing. This can't be real. Like, we need to go and see it just to like make sure that they're wrong because the pictures didn't even really show it. And anyways, long story short, my then roommate went and saw the place. I didn't even have to go and see it. He did, right? Path of least resistance. He did that for me because I wasn't able to. And it's like the most beautiful view of any city I have ever seen. It was not only 1 square foot terrace, but a second balcony as well. And, the unfolding from there in terms of what happened, like he ends up meeting one of my best friends and they get married and all this stuff. But so he lived 1 to 2 days a week there with me for about 8 months or something like that, at which point he moved out. Yeah. So within, I don't know, 6 to 8 months, he ended up moving out because he got married to one of my other friends. And it was just it was so fun while he was there, but it was also like the bridge of incidents between me and this apartment that I otherwise never would have been able to afford when we first moved in. But that kind of leads us to our next chapter, which was Zoe and I both deciding that we were going to seriously scale our income in our businesses in like January of 2020. We were both like, okay, we're going to start reaching for like 20K months in business. At least that was like my goal. And we both started really approaching it from a quantum perspective. I know that you had similar goals around like money at the time.
Yeah, definitely. It was like just this chapter of becoming more of a conscious creator in that space that is finances. And just like I said, being able to create predictable results, because prior to that, I mean, the journey of entrepreneurship, I think a lot of you can relate. Sometimes it can be a bit of a roller coaster. Sometimes you got a lot coming in and not so much. I wanted to create more stability for myself. So that was around my intentions as well, too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, it was at that time that we actually downloaded the idea for the Quantum Creators course, which became a great source of revenue for both of us, but there was other things we were each doing in terms of coaching. And I had a variety of different courses that I was launching. And that entire year of 2020 was like the year I, took over the whole apartment and had the most beautiful view in my office and got my dream car and scaled my income to consistency in like 20K plus months. And that was really like the year where I like just focused on abundance, knowing what we knew with quantum creation. And, that was during the pandemic. The year following was a year that we both did a lot of our own deep internal work. But I mean, what was interesting about the like quantum leap in income for me was I was kind of expecting it to be like, all of a sudden, just like, bam, here's a whole bunch of money. Cause there were certain like school loans I wanted to pay off and stuff, but it wasn't like that. It was actually more like it was an increase in revenue through my business rather than like a lump sum. Because again, I think like the universe knows better than what we even think that we want. So what actually really served me was having it start to increase the revenue in my business, which very quickly allowed me to make all those changes that I desired. Whereas like a lump sum of money wasn't actually what I wanted at that time. But, I've seen people use this we've had people in our course decide on 10K or 20K and just have it manifest out of nowhere. So I think it's always just in your best interest. And I know for you, Zoe, like, I just remember that period of time where you especially like really invested your time into just having fun. Like, I'd be like, so what are you up to today? And you'd be like, oh, I just went on a 3-hour bike ride. And like, I signed 2 new clients today.
Yeah.
You were just like, oh, and that was also the time too, that you decided to call a specific person back into your life with quantum creation. Maybe that's the story you want to tell.
Yeah. So fun. But the thing was like that we were both focusing on abundance, and it was beautiful is that we were kind of both on this journey together. And like us just sharing our success stories between each other, like again, that energy of just like sharing of the success stories, it starts to create a beautiful momentum and just continuously expand the realm of possibilities. And that's what happens for our creators inside the community. They continuously share these success stories, and we all just get to celebrate and get even more inspired about the journey when we hear these, when we read them. So yeah, I know like that was really powerful. We were sharing bits and pieces of it on the Lo and Zoe show, but there was like so much more that was happening behind the scenes with both of us. Like, so like the quantum goes so deep, or it's so expansive, however you want to call it. But it was just such a beautiful chapter, and really I prioritize fun. Those of you who may have lived in Toronto or similar climates know that like when summer comes around, or as soon as the sun comes out, those of you who are watching on YouTube right now, I'm like literally under the Tuscan sun, and it's really bright on the video. But like, as soon as the sun comes out, it's like everyone goes out to play. And I really prioritized abundance and like that that month specifically, I think you were talking about, Lo, was like, I ended up making more money, or like the same amount, my entry level marketing salary when I got out of my postgraduate program in Toronto was like, I think 32.5. Like that's how much money I make, and it would make in a year. Okay. I made that, or like just over it, just around it, in 1 month. And that was like such a quantum leap for me, because I was able to see like me trusting myself into this leap into entrepreneurship like years before. Like, look where I am now. I'm literally in the waterfront condo that I thought I had to be a CEO to have. I'm making as much money as I would have made in a year in 1 month. Like, how is this possible? It's possible because of quantum creation and the consistency with it and the education behind it. But yeah, beyond that, like after that point in time, I remember was when I just decided to manifest a specific person, which was kind of like a fun experiment. There was this gentleman from my past who really was one of these men who raised the bar. It was like I dated, and felt a certain way about things, about men and my situation and like what was possible for me. And then I met this man and like everything changed. The funny thing about him as well was that I actually did that whole list where I wrote the list of like everything about this person. I actually named this person. This person had that name. Not a very common name either. So it was like such a manifestation whirlwind of a story, but he was always on the back of my mind. And I remember, Lo, you would bring him up from time to time and be like, this gentleman, what are we going to call him? Ben or something?
Sure.
Like, I can't remember. We've used code names for some people we've spoken about on the podcast before, but basically I just decided to call this person back into my life to see what was there potential wise. And one of my favorite stories about quantum creation, like, is when Lo and I were literally meditating at my house to one of our favorite quantum tracks. And this Bluetooth speaker interrupted because I was getting a FaceTime call. And I had just decided to go to the quantum about this person. And that was him. He had never FaceTimed me before. We like didn't have that type of relationship. We would text like maybe every like random few months, just being like, I saw this and I thought of you, or like whatever. And there he was like FaceTiming me. And I remember I was like, whoa, look. And you're like, pick it up, Zoe. Phone. What are you doing? I was like, look, look what is it? Oh, it was so funny. It was just like, a beautiful moment. Ended up having like somewhat of a relationship with this person for like almost a year, 10 months or so. Didn't end up going the way that I, that I had thought it would. But it was all divine. It was actually exactly what was perfect for that time. And I learned so much. And one of the biggest things that I learned through that entire situation, that entire relationship, was that I was the creator of my reality, and I could really just see it all unfolding.
Yeah. And one question, people have about manifestation all the time is like, can you manifest a specific person, or can you manifest on behalf of others? And the answer is absolutely yes. There are no limits in terms of what you're able to create, because we are all a collective consciousness. But what might happen is that person actually isn't what was right for you, which that's okay. That's clarity. But generally, I would say you're better off being open to like, the universe deciding who it is for you. But if you really want to like call someone back into your life that maybe you don't have closure around, you can use it for that if you want to. Like, it's really up to you what it is that you want to create. And, it wasn't long after that. I'm just thinking about this in terms of like the last like 4 years or whatever, chronologically. It wasn't long after that you decided to move to Bali, like right in the middle of the most pandemic-y time of the pandemic in Toronto, the most lockdown. It had been about almost a year at that point. We were all feeling pretty worn out. There was no end in sight. And so I was like, I'm moving to Bali.
Yeah. I mean, like that was that. It was like, as soon as I knew that that's what I wanted to do next, I trusted and knew the power. Again, this is like predictable results with quantum creation. Like that's what makes it so different than other techniques, let's say, because this, you just know that when you set your mind, you set your focus and you practice and you understand, you're educated on that level, that anything you desire is possible. So yes, all of my eggs were in one basket during a time when the rest of the world was, really in a very unpredictable, uncertain time. I mean, the universe is always like, we're always in uncertain, nobody's in control of all of that. But this was like extra heightened, let's say, in the collective. And I just decided, I sold everything I owned, and I just literally moved to Bali. And this point in time when I got through was like this very specific, like 5 to 7 days where both countries were open for flights out, because that was changing day to day. When I got through, it was like this God forced pathway that was like, so, I mean, no, there was like nobody on my flight. I got to sleep across all the seats. You know, it was just like one of those situations. Like, it was, I created it. It was meant to happen for me. So it happened in the path of least resistance. And I just held the faith. Like, I literally sold everything I owned. I said goodbye to my Canadian life. And, you know, I set off on a plane, and that was it. I lived in Bali for almost 2 years. And there was so much resistance. I remember even like telling people or about what I was doing, and hearing that resistance or their concerns. And I was like, no, absolutely not. It's just, it's a done deal for me. It's already done.
Well, people would ask me like, how is she doing that? Like, you can't go anywhere. I was like, actually you can. If you're Zoe, you can just do what you want, because that's the thing, is like, we are more powerful than any circumstances, but we're not taught that. We're taught quite the opposite, that we're powerless. But when you start to really embody this identity of creator, which, like we said earlier, is based on an understanding of the science and an education of what reality even is and how it behaves on a profound, subatomic level, the circumstances aren't things that you allow then to take you out of what you know to be possible. So Zoe was just like, I'm going, period. And, that's what happened. And I would say that mindset kind of takes me to like my next story. And we're sort of getting to like relatively up to date here. I mean, there are so many things in between all these kind of like key points, but we'll be here for 6 hours sharing them all with you guys. Because, trying to think now what the timeline was. It was almost a year after you left Toronto, or actually it was a year. It was a year after you left Toronto that I quantum leapt into probably my favorite manifestation. Zoe and I for years, have talked about our quantum men. When I say years, probably like 2 years, 2 years somewhere of the podcast. We talk about, the relationships that we were calling in. And because of quantum creation, I really believed that I could have, anything and everything that I wanted. To me, when it came to a relationship, there was nothing that I needed to, just accept. Like, I could create whatever kind of connection with whatever kind of man I desired to. And, there was some work around releasing things from the past and beliefs about myself and accepting that I was worthy of that kind of connection and love. But because of my knowledge of quantum creation, I really just ignored all of the BS narrative out there around, just take what you can get, or like be realistic about things when it comes to love and relationships. I was just like, no. And like, I was 33, turning 34, actually. I was about just a few days short of turning 34 when I connected with my now partner and boyfriend. This was last April. We're about to celebrate our 1 year of like officialness. And even though it was like, it didn't matter to me how old I was. It didn't matter to me how long I'd been single, which was like a long freaking time. I was like, this is what I'm going to have. I wrote about this person. I wrote about our connection. I was very clear on the feeling. I imagined us having conversations about the quantum, which we do all the time, like sit and talk about the universe and the multiverse and like crazy stuff like that. And he's like a definition of a hot nerd. And he's like, you've been holding off on me that like, you're actually also a crazy nerd because you're into like the quantum science. And I'm like, I guess so. He's like, I didn't know that you were a nerd. And now you're talking to me about like the multiverse. Like, I mean, we nerd out on this stuff. But anyways, I mean, the way that unfolded was very like, we met on an app and we just allowed for it to unfold. But I think for me, the part about it that is very synchronistic is just like all the little things. Like when I go back to journals from like 2-3 years before I met him, and I read the description of the man that I was going to meet, it's like him to a T, to the point where I showed him one of these And he thought that I had just written it about him, which would have been kind of, I'm like, no, I wrote this 2 years before we met. And like, he was just like mind blown. If anyone that didn't even know me came across that, but knew him and read it, they'd be like, oh, this is Eric. Like, anyways, but just the way that we think the same, and we're just like, we say the same thing all the time. But it's so much deeper than any of that. It's just, I mean, we're a year in, we talk all the time. We're making plans right now for our anniversary. And we both just said, like, it's important that we celebrate this, because it's like, we're happier now a year in, way happier than we were when we first met. Like, there was like the honeymoon period has just grown and grown. There's been no, like, oh, remember how great that, like, anyways. So yeah, I mean, in terms of just my favorite and most desired and anticipated quantum leap, I really wanted like my best friend, someone I could feel just totally like myself around. I didn't have a great history with the relationships, to be honest, like at all. But I knew that this was available for me, and I knew that I could have something that felt this good. And yeah, so that was, the last year and a bit of my life, having that unfold. And I shared briefly that 2021 was a year of like us both doing a lot of internal work. And I know now for me that was because I was being prepared for this next quantum leap. And there was just some things within myself that I needed to look at and release, and some nervous system regulation I needed to do because of past experiences. And we actually talk about that inside of Quantum Creators, how, there are often things that we need to look at, but we'll be guided into whatever that is as a part of the bridge of incidents. We don't have to go looking for our blocks. If there's something for us to be made aware of so that we can address it, we'll be made aware of it. We don't have to go and find it or anything like that. So yeah, I mean, that kind of like brings us up to date. And there's other things happening right now too. There's like, I've started a whole second business. Zoe has just in the last couple of days returned to Italy after like 3 years. No, 5 years.
Almost
Four.
five. Like we're moving on to like the 5. Yeah.
Right. So, it's the quantum life is continuing to, to unfold. But yeah, we've never really done like a timeline of quantum leaps.
No. And I mean, I loved this. And I especially love like your last quantum leap, your favorite quantum leap, because this has been the journey. Like those of you who've actually listened to the Lo and Zoe show for years, we have literally talked about our quantum men on the podcast. So like, I mean, it's just so beautiful to witness the unfolding, and for you to have that in your life now. Seriously, cannot wait till I'm the one reporting on my quantum. It's coming. It is coming. I mean, I've seeded it in the quantum field. I know that it's a very predictable outcome.
I've just always had a feeling that he's Italian, and now you're being called back to Italy. So,
I mean, who knows? Because the pull here was very strong. So we'll see. We'll see what my quantum summer holds.
Well, stay tuned on the Lo and Zoe show, because you'll hear it here first.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's really fun looking back, just at how many things we've intentionally created. And I think for me, it's like quantum creation is a source of magic. Like it's allowed me to create so many times in my life where I was blown away by just the magic of it all and how things could unfold on my behalf. And those moments of awe where you just look at your life and you're like, oh my God, like this is amazing. I can't believe I'm living this. I can't believe this is happening to and for me. But that's the power of being the creator. And the best part is like, it's really just knowing this, it's education based. Then it's having the practice that, like we said, 10 minutes a day, you don't have to be perfect about it. With the awareness that allows you to make space for those things to come in, because the law of attraction or traditional manifestation teachings, at least the way that I always understood them and tried to apply them, was a lot of like getting involved in the unfolding instead of making space for it, like needing to control each part of the control of the unfolding. So, when I met my boyfriend, I really just got out of the way. I allowed it to unfold. Whereas previously with law of attraction, I was like, got to be in this mindset. And I'm manifesting a text from this person, and I'm manifesting that this date goes well. I didn't do any of that because I knew that with quantum creation, like it was done. I'd been creating this for like years. It was either going to be him and it was either just going to unfold on its own, or it wasn't. And, something, but there was just a lot of trust there for me because of what we teach here. And, yeah, And, if for those watching or listening, if this is a journey, if you've been on the podcast and you've heard us talking about this, you've been in our masterclasses, I would imagine, but we are excited to share it with you, our masterclass that is linked in the description in the bio for you guys, or where, not the bio, the places, the show notes, the description, wherever this is. It's really, really fun to get to watch other people put this into practice and have it completely change their life. And I think one of my favorite pieces of feedback we have ever gotten on Quantum Creators, and we have so many screenshots and testimonials on the page for the course. I think one of my favorite pieces of feedback was someone saying, I walk around and I look at people and I just think, like, if only they knew what I knew, because that's how I've always felt. I'm like, oh my God, if people just understood like what reality actually is and who they really are, like this would just be such a whole different world. And you just walk around with this sort of like, like swagger. Like, I know that I am that powerful. And I know that this reality is moldable, and that's what this does for people. And so as a result of that, they allow things to quantum leap.
Yeah. Mic drop right there.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so powerful. It's incredible, you guys. Those of you who haven't dabbled in this world, I mean, welcome to Lo and Soph's world and everything that we've created. But it's like, it's a whole other life on the other side of really understanding that. And I say that from my heart. Like, I'm just so incredibly grateful that we found this when we did, that we've created the things that we've had, that we continue to share about it, because it really truly is the content that changes your life in a multitude of ways and multitude of dimensions.
Yeah. And, we talk about a lot of other things too, and we'll be doing weekly episodes of the Lo and Zo Show now, both on YouTube and on our podcast. If you're finding us on YouTube and you want to dive into, we have, like I said, over 100+ episodes. We've had guest speakers. We've documented this whole journey that we're talking about. One of the quantum leaps we didn't even talk about was our podcast, Quantum Leap, and like manifesting. I think that was one of the earliest episodes, actually, manifesting like our dream podcast studio for free. And like, just, there's so many like good stories that we shared along the way that, like I said, we just wouldn't have time for it today. But so we'll be showing up regularly on here every single week. We are at the Lo and Zo Show now, both on TikTok and Instagram, but we're new there in terms of sharing content. So come and join us in those places, and just thanks for being here. And our community is a really special one, and we're excited to get it out to more people, have more people join us in it.
Yeah. Love you guys. And so excited to be on this journey with you. Bye.
Bye.